Hamann. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for watching my video. This story documents a battle that has always fascinated me, ever since I read about it as a boy. A battle that changed a continent, and yet is almost forgotten. A battle surrounded by myths, lies, and half-truths. A battle that was fought in one of the remotest corners of the world, and yet that changed history in more ways than most people can imagine. But why has this battle intrigued me so much? And what is it about this battle that has affected me on a personal level? As I pondered this question, I came up with an answer that was more esoteric and complex than I initially realized. The Battle of Cuito Cuanavale, the climactic clash that ended a decades-long conflict and the last battle of the Cold War, was fought in the 9 months between my conception in August 1987 and my birth on the 30th of May 1988. Perhaps this is what shaped my interest and fascination with military history. Perhaps this is why I was born to war.
The United States at the highest level requested assistance, or rather requested South Africa to go in and assist Unita.
I remember the day that it happened. It was a couple of months after my 18th birthday, and I was a driver at 10 Anti-Aircraft Regiment in Cape Town, and had taken a batch of guys out to the shooting range. When we came back, we were told to pack our kit, get ready, and that we were going to be leaving in 24 hours, heading up to the border. Now, the truth is that, we knew nothing about what was going on outside the borders, or any news or anything like that. All we were interested in was a weekend pass and trying to find girls on the weekend. So we packed our kit. The next day we loaded trucks and 35mm guns as well as 20mm guns onto the train at the station near the base, and we set off on a 5-day trip to Southwest Africa. We arrived at Grootfontein, got off the train, and I recall vaguely that Magnus Milan was there, and we were told that we were going to go into Angola, that there were Cubans there, and that we were going to be fighting the scourge of communism, none of which we knew anything about. So they said it was voluntary, and those who didn't want to go didn't have to go. They handed out wills to us, which we all had to fill in, and then we were issued with green uniforms and sort of like tacky boot type things. Some guys had G3s. I kept my R1, and for the next 10 days or so we were involved in preparing trucks and painting camouflage on guns and trucks and that sort of thing. And then we set off in this huge convoy to Angola. Again, none of us really knew anything about what was going on, and I can remember driving through cities in Angola that I didn't know where they were or what they were, and feeling a little bit like a conquering World War II hero as I'd seen in movies, because there were people standing on balconies, Portuguese people standing on balconies cheering, that sort of thing. And we passed convoys of refugees on the way out. Eventually we ended up at a place called Sila, which was the headquarters there. Again, we didn't know any of that. We just kind of like lived from day to day. I was in a gun position with a 20mm gun by the hospital at Sila, and we spent our days hoping that we wouldn't get attacked, and kind of running to battle stations when a MiG flew over, high over but out of range to us. And we were there a couple of months, and then all of a sudden they said, pack your stuff, we're going home. And what we heard was that the Americans had withdrawn support from the South African for the South African government and the South African effort, as well as the African states that supported the South African involvement in Angola. So we packed up, turned around, drove off for a day. Then they suddenly told us, stop, no, we're not going back. And we settled in at a place called Robert Williams, where the guns were all set up alongside the airfield and protecting the airfield. And we watched a number of flights of American supplies coming in, landing there. And then a few days later, I was shipped out and went back.
On the 11th of November 1975, the Portuguese handed power over to the communist MPLA in Luanda, ending 477 years of colonial rule. The MPLA was soon recognized as the official government of the country by the Soviet Union, Cuba, and the Eastern Bloc. The fighting against apartheid South Africa gave Agostinho Neto and the MPLA political credibility with African states, many of whom rapidly switched their allegiance and recognized them as the government. With continued military support from Cuba and the Soviet Union, the MPLA was able to destroy the FNLA on the outskirts of the capital, and following South Africa's withdrawal from the country in early 1976, the MPLA succeeded in setting up a Marxist government in all the urban and semi-urban areas of the country, whilst Unita retreated to the bush of the southeast. South Africa's intervention in Angola in 1975 was multifaceted. It involved both conventional and unconventional troops. The troops who were to play the most significant part in the future war were those of Bravo Group. These were approximately 1,000 men from a breakaway faction of the FNLA, who had received training and weapons from legendary South African bushfighter Jan Breitenbach. And members of the elite reconnaissance commandos, or recce's. Bravo Group, under Breitenbach's command, had cut a bloody swathe through their opponents in Angola before the termination of Operation Savannah.
Approximately, I think, something like 80 kilometers a day. By this time, my troops were getting good. I mean, they were really getting on with it now. They were out of those vehicles and into assault formations, which shoot the hell out of these people, you see, and then they would back up and move because they didn't expect this.
Realizing the value of these fighting troops and not wishing to abandon them to their communist enemies, the South Africans decided to integrate Bravo Group fully into the South African Defence Force, where, with training, they would eventually become the legendary 3-2 Battalion, the Buffalo Battalion, the terrible ones. 32 Battalion would fight their most legendary battle on the 21st of May 1980. The battalion was now commanded by the man who would command the SADF at Cuito Cuanavale, the Falcon, Dion Ferreira. Buffaloes were attacking the Fapla-held town of Savate, 75 kilometers into Angola. This attack was carried out on the behalf of Unita, who were in the process of capturing most of the towns in the southeast. At 10 a.m. on the 21st, the Falcon ordered the mortars to begin bombarding the Fapla-held town. Unita intelligence had indicated that a battalion of 300 Faplas were holding the town. However, the 270 buffaloes attacking the town were in for a nasty surprise. Unita had deliberately misled the South Africans, knowing that if they knew the truth, they would never agree to attack Savate. Instead of 300 poorly equipped troops, Savate was guarded by over 1,060 well-armed soldiers supported by heavy weapons. The 3-2 battalion soldiers were outnumbered nearly 5 to 1. In a battle lasting all day, 32 battalion battled through the enemy trenches and into their headquarters. Under withering fire, Fapla began to withdraw, but these were buffaloes they were fighting, and the retreat became a rout. Nearly 600 Fapla troops were killed in Savate. 3-2 battalion suffered 15 men dead, its heaviest ever loss in a battle. But before handing over the town to Unita, the terrible ones had written their name in the pages of military glory. Most foreign observers expected Jonas Savimbi and his Unita movement to fade away into obscurity, like the FNLA of Holden Roberto, following the MPL seizing power in 1975. However, the Swiss-educated Savimbi fluent in multiple languages, was destined to become one of Africa's great guerrilla leaders. Going deep into the bush of eastern Angola, and making the most of his South African and Zairean support, Savimbi and Unita began to fight back against the MPLA. From 1976 to 1979, Unita staged numerous hit-and-run guerrilla attacks against the MPLA and their allies. Then, in 1980, with his movement gaining strength, Savimbi decided to begin a conventional assault on the MPLA-held towns in the southeast, starting with Cuanga in April 1980.
Quem é que manda na nossa terra? Quem é que manda na nossa terra? O te foi indelible.
By 1984, when Unita held this military parade in their capital of Jamba, Savimbi had managed to become the darling of the anti-communist West. The one-time socialist and student of Che Guevara was embraced by the Reagan administration as a champion in the fight against Soviet expansion. My father Hilton, a photojournalist at this time, was part of the South African press corps that went to Jamba and stood filming footage just like this as the ranks of Unita fighters filed past. In 1985, the Soviet Union and the MPLA realized that unless Unita was destroyed in a massive conventional attack, the war in Angola would drag on indefinitely. Accordingly, the Angolan government planned the largest ever full frontal attack against the Unita bases in Angola. In a two-pronged offensive named Operation Second Congress, the Angolan armed forces moved massive conventional columns against the Unita strongholds of Kazumbo and Mavinga. The size and scale of the offensive caught Unita and the South Africans off guard. FAPLA deployed some 20 brigades. Soviet staff officers and advisors were also present with the brigades, and the result was that after 2 months of furious combat, FAPLA was on the outskirts of both Mavinga and Kazumbo. And with Unita facing the real possibility of collapse, the South Africans made the reluctant decision to intervene. If Mavinga and Jamba fell, it would open up the entire southeastern border to SWAPO infiltration. With FAPLA forces grouped around Mavinga for the kill, the South African Air Force launched an all-out bombing offensive against the exposed columns. Using their full arsenal of Canberras, Buccaneers, Mirages and Impalas, the South African Air Force decimated the FAPLA columns throughout September 1985. Additional support from a battery of multiple rocket launchers and the aerial redeployment of Unita fighters from other fronts, the South Africans managed to cut off the FAPLA brigades from their supply centre at Cuito Cuanavale. Subsequently, FAPLA was forced to rely on helicopters flying out of Cuito Cuanavale to resupply their forward elements. The South African recce's observed these flights, and plans were put in place to deal the decisive blow of the campaign. On the 27th of September, Colonel Pine Pino from 8th Squadron led a flight of Impalas to ambush the Hind helicopters carrying Soviet and Cuban advisors. With a burst of 30mm cannon fire, the helicopters, advisors and Fapla's hopes of victory came crashing down. In 1986, the Angolan government decided to renew their offensive against Mapinga, despite their heavy losses. In order to forestall this renewed offensive and deny the Angolan army the necessary fuel, the South African Defence Force decided to attack the port and fuel storage facilities in Port Namibe in southwest Angola. On the 5th of June 1986, the South African strike craft deployed ski boats from beyond the horizon. Aboard these ski boats were elite soldiers from the 4th Reconnaissance Commando, the naval wing of the famous Recce's. Nearing their target after dark, the ski boats dropped off their attack divers. The Recce divers penetrated the harbour's defences and set to their task of demolition. Team 1's target were the Cuban and Soviet ships unloading supplies in the harbour. Whilst Team 2 attached limpet mines to the massive storage tanks housing a substantial percentage of Angola's fuel. The frogmen escaped without detection and were picked up by the ski boats before dawn. The Recce's were well on their way back to the strike craft when their charges exploded. 2 Soviet cargo ships were damaged, 1 Cuban cargo ship sank, and at least 2 fuel tanks were destroyed. Moscow decided to double down on their support for the MPLA and began shipping hundreds of tons of arms and missiles direct to Luanda. The previous offensives had failed because of unexpected South African intervention, but they had also demonstrated that Unita could not yet fight conventional war alone. This time, however, the Fapla columns would be protected from the South African Air Force by dozens of advanced MiG-23 fighters and some of the most sophisticated surface-to-air missiles in their Warsaw Pact arsenal. On August 17, 1987, the Fapla brigades crossed the bridge into Savimbi-land. It was at this moment, in August 1987, when the war in Angola escalated out of all recognition, that South Africa's first nuclear bomb became secretly operational. A free-fall device that could be dropped by a buccaneer, it represented the determination of the Botha regime to maintain military supremacy in Africa. And it was also at this moment, in August 1987, that Hilton and Joy Hamann decided to have their second child. I was conceived. Realizing the strategic importance of the Cuito Cuanavale bridge, 4 Recce had conducted training into the best method of dropping the span since May 1987. It was decided that the best time to drop the bridge would be after the Fapla brigades had crossed, so as to trap them on the eastern bank. Accordingly, on the night of the 25th of August 1987, 12 men from 4 Recce were dropped by Puma helicopter in the darkness 70 kilometers away from the bridge. The bridge was closely guarded, so the operators had to canoe all night and then lay up during the day. When darkness fell on the 26th of August, the dozen Recce operators continued onward toward their target. The team swam in buddy pairs as they approached the bridge. However, Major Fred Wilker and his buddy were spotted by an enemy patrol near the bridge and came under intense small arms and grenade fire. With flares bursting overhead, the divers were visible in the water as they struggled to swim deeper and reach the bridge. 7 of the swimmers managed to lay their charges on the support beams of the bridge, despite the incoming fire. The teams drifted downstream from the bridge, but their troubles were far from over. Staff Sergeant Anton Beekman was attacked by one of the many crocodiles infesting the Cuito River. Grabbing his knife, Beekman managed to stab the reptile in the eyes repeatedly, until it opened its jaws and he swam away. All the recce's were decorated for their bravery, but the bridge was soon repaired. If the South Africans wanted to stop this offensive, they would have to send in their conventional ground forces.